Welcome to another episode. Today I'm joined by Zon, who is the co-founder of Initia. Welcome, Zon, and thank you so much for taking the time. I know you just got engaged. Mainnet is also coming up, so must be a very busy time for you right now.
Hola, sir. Yes, did just get engaged. Mainnet is coming, but for some reason, all I can think about is Trump's wife.
So before this call, you were telling me about your shitcoining over the engagement weekend. Do you want to share that story, like how you jumped into the Melania and Trump trade?
Yeah. So for context, I've always been somewhat in the trenches, especially during the bear market. But when things started heating up with Initia and I started getting focused on building, really my portfolio was just split between like stables and ETH. So really just, yes, stable coins altogether and just farming various types of things so that I can be a passive actor. But when I was on the plane on a little trip to Hawaii for the weekend because I got engaged and it was a long weekend here in the US, which is, by the way, too short just 3 days is too short to fly for 11 hours to Hawaii and then come back a few days later. So I would recommend not doing that in the future. But while I was on the plane, Trump launched. And luckily, this plane had Elon's Starlink Wi-Fi. And so I pulled up a hot wallet that I had because I stored one of my private keys on a 1Password for like this hot wallet. Loaded it up, aped Trump pretty early. It was at like $2 or something, and then proceeded to sell it like quite quickly after. And that was pretty fun. But that like was mind share for a day of this 2-day vacation, right? And then the second day of the vacation, Melania decides to get launched. And so we sent all the profits from the Trump trade into Melania. And that was basically the entire second day of our vacation. And it's funny, we flew far away to this tropical island to escape crypto and life and work for a bit. And then it always just ends up following you anyways.
As long as the meme coin trade paid for the vacation, right? Like the president is already making money. But okay,
That's
we're
right.
not here
That's
to
what
talk about
my
meme
wife
coin.
said as well. Yeah.
Okay, as long as the wedding is paid for, all good. But we're here to talk about Initia. So I was doing some research on Initia, and like one of your tweets really stood out. Like if I had to describe Initia to someone, it would be basically opinionated infra for opinionated builders, right? Like I feel like that kind of resonated with me a lot. So I want to know, like, where does that come from? Like where does that belief come from that builders are opinionated and they would need opinionated infrastructure like Initia to build their apps?
Yeah. So I think there's a few things about having opinionated infrastructure that I think are important here. Firstly, I think sometimes too many choices and having everything be so flexible ultimately is a bad thing because you get every permutation an example and it's really hard to like actually move forward. And that's why having like a guided hand or a guiding hand is often great for early ecosystems. And that's why you see things like the Solana Foundation or like the Sui Foundation, like helping shape initial ecos. And in worlds where you've kind of left everything up to the free market, you get a little bit of stagnation. So for example, something like Cosmos never was really guided well by either Atom itself or like the ICF. And, nothing really came out of Cosmos except for the forbidden name. And so I think this also applies to a lot of things outside of crypto as well. This is a really bad example. I probably shouldn't say this, but in a lot of developing countries, when dictatorships exist, right, there are some advancements of like the country progressing. There's also examples where that doesn't happen, but under like strict rule, things move forward. That's why when there's wartime in like the Roman Empire, we all love the Roman Empire here. They would elect one or two leaders to like help guide things during the war. And so, not to say Initia is in any way, shape, or form a dictatorship, but I think having some sort of like guiding hand for especially something as big as a multi-chain ecosystem is very important. And the reason it's important is because when you're building multi-chain, there are so many pieces in the back end of these products and applications that need to fit together really well, like Lego bricks, right? Like one of the things people said about traditional monolithic blockchains is that these are it's like a Lego set, right? You can plug and play all the DeFi elements together very easily. And once you apply that to multi-chain and you have people working with different interoperability standards, they're getting prices from different places for the same asset. They're posting data to different places. You get this fragmentation of infrastructure that creates a lot of friction when trying to grow network effects of multiple different blockchains that ideally should be working together and in some way, getting bigger. It's not necessarily true that every rollup on Initia needs to be best friends with another rollup on Initia, but having alignment along the architecture stack, as well as some things like the economic stack, allows you to work in a bit more of an aligned way and grow the pie together. And so Initia's infra, for example, every rollup on the interwoven stack is a Cosmos SDK-based chain. And then there's some things that are just set in there because we're opinionated about how it should work. So the Initia layer 1 is the settlement layer. You use Celestia for DA. Layer 0 is the choice for interoperability. And then oracles are piped in through the layer 1, and we use like a built-in oracle system. And this way you basically have all the backend standards being shared, and now everything can work together. I think the true flexibility and customizability that teams care about when they are opinionated builders are how they're building their application and what's actually happening under the hood when you build this full stack product or you vertically integrate. They do not really care about which DA layer they're using, which interop service they're using, which oracle they're using. They just care that it works and it's there, right? Unless maybe you're someone like a grant farmer and you might have 5 different DA layers that your rollup is using. I don't think it makes much sense. So by fixing those components, and then Initia gives you the flexibility on pieces that I think do matter, which are the VM you use. So we support EVM, MoveVM, or WASM VM, whatever smart contracting language or framework you want to work with that's best for you and your application. And then by having the Cosmos SDK underneath every one of these layer 2s, you can customize things like transaction ordering, execution, everything about your chain that can make it unique for your product offering.
Makes sense. I think so. This thesis in general of interwoven or interconnected rollups, Cosmos has always had this thesis, and then now we're seeing Superchain and Elastic Chain, AgLayer. Pretty much every major rollup ecosystem is going in this direction, right? So on the one hand, this is kind of validation of your thesis. But what I like about your approach is that you're opinionated, right? You've chosen layer 0 as the interop provider because it just works. It just works for your needs. Whereas on the EVM side, we're still seeing the EF figuring out how to come in. Do they come in with a standard or not? A lot of these foundation teams of let's say Optimism Superchain, they're still trying to figure out what does the interop standard look like. So I think that's a very unique edge. But do you also see it as competition? Because technically everyone is providing the same thing, right? So how do people attract developers to their ecosystem? It's such a big question, but it's such an important question.
Yeah, it is a very important question and one that's very hard to solve. I think there's a few things. One is definitely the infrastructure, right? It needs to be good, but these days having good infrastructure starts to become table stakes. Everyone has pretty solid infrastructure. Mm-hmm. The nice thing about Initia Stack is at least you don't have to think about it at all or deal with any choices. But still, Initia Stack is really the only place where you can customize what you're trying to build easily within existing frameworks. If you go to something like the OP Stack or the Elastic Chains or Arbitrum Orbit, you can't really change much about your chain, right? Mm-hmm. There are stuff like Stylus, but Cosmos SDK is obviously the most flexible framework for building unique chains, and it's what everyone still continues to use. But Cosmos itself and building a layer 1 is just a very daunting task. And so by using those existing frameworks, we can offer the flexibility that's important within a framework that has been, used for years and already has so much documentation and, other developers to be able to customize those components easily. And that's why something like Hyperliquid chose to use those pieces. Now, when it comes to actually attracting developers, I think the target customers of these various clusters is widely different.
Mhm.
So you have basically the super chain and some others that are really focused on these large base layer institutional chains. And I have the belief that base layer chains are just cooked, right? Like I think through the past 2 years, we have seen tens and tens of new base layer chains that don't move the needle in any way, shape, or form. Maybe they create value because the institution creating them has a lot of value to like shove into this ecosystem.
Mhm.
But in a couple of years, will they still be there? Will innovation still be there? Will users and liquidity be there? Every single one of these chains is going to be fast, parallelized, and have the same lending market and DEX and Velodrome fork and etc. Right?
Yeah.
I think what we'll see in like 2 years from now is that you'll have chains that are just purpose built, right? They're
Mhm.
for their specific application use case. They have tailored and customized something for their one application or purpose. And that is what Initia is really focused on, making accessible and easy to do. And I think everyone that's building a base layer chain right now is cucking themselves, because in 2 years down the line, like they're going to be irrelevant, because even the app chains are going to be, fast, parallelized, and having whatever VM they want. And so we need to be building for the future in a few years down the road, which is where people are building these application specific blockchains, right? Like what would you say is the largest success this year of a blockchain?
Hyperliquid is the poster child, right? Like it kind of proves everyone's app chain theory right. But I do think there's also value in institutional chains, right? Like Base and the Coinbase team, they've shoved in so many resources into the infrastructure. They've practically like pushed forward innovation in the superchain ecosystem, right? Like they're working on so many things, from improving like user onboarding from their exchange to actually pushing forward some of these standards in crypto itself. I feel like there's a net positive in institutions building their own chain as well, because they would bring in their own ecosystem of users, right? At least from net new users, that's a good thing. I don't know what's going to happen 3 years from now, but you're right that for the degen builders who've been here for 5 years, we need something that's like more customizable so that they can build cracked tech in a way with what's best available today. So I feel like that's the market
Yeah,
you're going after.
I think you're right that it's very plus EV for people to have these institutional chains right now. I think that the value flows, and once you've onboarded these users, into app chains later,
Yeah.
because they're offering something for those users that they can't get elsewhere. And so I'm thankful, for the institutional chains right now, and I hope to eat their lunch later.
Yeah, I mean, so there are two different things, right? Like on the one side, we're seeing this clusters of chains, but then there's also Monad and Mega ETHs of the world, where they're like one big fat chain like Solana, and then we're going to onboard apps into this ecosystem. So it's almost like two different sides of the world, where you're like build your own app, have your own everything, and Monad and Mega ETH are again running the Solana playbook of building the base, having a foundation, onboarding new developers. So do you think, again, these guys are trying to onboard new developers into the crypto ecosystem, or do you see it differently?
I think that these very fast chains are cool. I think, fundamentally there are the two approaches are we'll have 1,000 chains or thousands of chains, or we'll have one chain. I cannot tell you which one is going to be the right answer, right? Like, I don't know. I, for example, spend most of my time on Ethereum. Like, I do not like the multi-chain experience right now.
Mhm.
But what I can say is that I don't think one chain will ever be able to handle everyone's use case. It won't be able to handle all the world's users, and it won't be able to handle like all the world's data. And so naturally, we're going to have multiple different blockchains, because people are going to want to own the value of their application, and they're also going to need to customize certain components. Whether it's as simple as something like transaction ordering and being able to handle that, to like fundamentally change your application, that's something that people will want to do. And so naturally, there will be more and more app chains over time as people do that, and it becomes easier to do that. But I still think that these monolithic chains that are really fast are great for the ecosystem and very plus EV, right? Like specifically, I think Mega ETH has done a phenomenal job of trying to build this cohort of applications that are trying to do something unique with really fast properties, right? Something like GTE is really awesome, just like a gigafast perp dex. But, there have been a lot of perp dexes on chain. Hyperliquid, and part of the reasons it was successful, well, one is because they were doing some good market making, but two, they reordered transactions, and that was just like a stepwise improvement to the UX that you couldn't get on a decentralized exchange before.
Mhm. I mean, so it's almost like you also need to figure out the interop onboarding experience, right? Because like let's say when it's just the one chain experience, it's very easy for that specific chain to figure out the bridges and everything. But what you're trying to build is like this multi VM, multi chain ecosystem with shared interop standards.
It's impossible. I mean, well, it's not impossible. We're going to do it, but it is, way harder than building one chain, right? Launching 10 chains with all these different VMs, people spend years just trying to build one rollup in a certain VM, right? We have 3 VMs now supported. We have all these new interop standards, and then we need to build the UX layer on top of all of this so that ultimately it can become seamless. What we've done right now is basically 2 simple things. And, obviously this will need to evolve over time. And there's this whole idea of chain abstraction. I know you have some hot takes on chain abstraction, so I'll let you talk about those in a minute. But the 2 things that we've basically done right now is, one, we've created this wallet widget. So the wallet widget, what it does is it uses wallets just as a signer. And that means whether it is signing an EVM-like transaction, a Cosmos transaction, or a Solana transaction, we're just using your signature. And so it doesn't matter like what type of the wallet you're using, or whether the wallet officially supports the Initia layer 1 or an interwoven rollup. We're just using your signature to sign this transaction. And what that has helped a lot with is, like, when you have different VMs and when you're using multiple different chains, you don't have to, get a specific RPC. You don't have to get a certain kind of wallet. You can just bring whatever, which is really handy. And the second thing is just a bridge widget. So within Initia's multi-chain world, we have fungibility of assets. So the USDC on one rollup is the same as another. And then we have this big hub of liquidity on the Initia layer 1 through something called Enshrine liquidity. And this allows you to move like from USDC on one rollup to ETH on another very easily. But this bridge widget just basically aggregates all onboarding for a layer 2 team. And so they just add this bridge widget, and now they can instantly onboard from any layer 0 enabled chain, any Cosmos chain, any other rollup on Initia, and even things like USDC and CCTP, which is really handy. And I think what is nice about this, owning those 2 pieces, is like these are the front ends for new users and like the onboarding experience. So all we need to do over time as we move to a more chain abstracted world is evolve those 2 pieces, because we already have the distribution for it amongst all the layer 2s on Initia. And we don't need to get people to like start using our new SDK and compete with like 10 other chain abstraction protocols.
Yeah, I mean, so in my books, when I was going through Initia's documentation and comms, it almost felt like this is the perfect chain abstracted user experience, right? Because you can control a lot of the things from the beginning, which are required to, actually provide an abstracted experience. Like the assets are fungible, the wallets are all figured out. Like you can use literally any wallet, and there's like a bridge widget, like you said. So in your own ecosystem, you can abstract the chains and just like users can move assets, just use the apps. But when you take this out of your ecosystem to the wider crypto ecosystem, everything breaks, and that's the biggest
Certainly.
problem, right? So even when we talk about chain abstraction, it's one thing to say that we're going to do chain abstraction in the EVM ecosystem. It's one thing to say that we're going to do it in the Initia ecosystem, but it's a whole other game to do it like across crypto, which is where it gets interesting, because this cycle's biggest chain is actually Solana. So you have to do it outside of the EVM as well. And that's like another engineering challenge. And I feel like that's the biggest challenge for chain abstraction protocols today. But I like the fact that you can control a lot of things, and the UX will be great. Like UX will be chain abstracted.
Inshallah.
But like I actually want to understand, like, so this is such a massive undertaking, right? Like, how do you wake up one day and you're like, I want to build an ecosystem of app chains that are just like everything figured out, value moves through them perfectly. It's just the perfect world, right? Like you know that meme where it shows that there are flying cars in 2050 or 2030. It's almost like you're imagining that world for crypto. So how do you have that sort of motivation, and what's the thought process to just like take that thought and act on it to build a company and build a project of that scale?
Yeah. So I think it's we have the benefit of hindsight, right? Like this is really take 3 on multi-chain expansion. Right? We had V1, which was Cosmos, fail. We had V2, which was like roll-ups on Ethereum in the multi-chain world that's happening there. And I would say, it has positives and negatives. And now this is really take 3, combining a lot of the lessons that we've seen from Cosmos, the lessons we've seen on Ethereum, and then a lot of like DeFi heavy background from me and Stan to create like economic systems that really tie things together so that you don't have a parasitic relationship between L2s and the L1, and making sure that value flows nicely, because every good chain needs to have a good token model, I think. Or at least I think in the future, which we are in now, chains that just have like their basic, regular, traditional token model that we've seen for just staking inflation and like foundation tokens is going to die. And so that's what makes me excited about like some parts of Initia's tokenomics, as well as like Berachain and POL. But over all my years in crypto, starting off as an Ethereum user, becoming a Cosmos dev, starting my own application within Cosmos, there's just been this demand for building app chains. Right? Like app chains is a narrative that has existed for so long, but never really taken off, right? Like it's been around for years, this concept. And so people continue to want it, but we haven't built the right version yet. And I think building up a team that has the experience from both of these previous multi-chain worlds just really put us in the perfect position to, like, I think, be the only ones that can build this properly and have this be successful. And I think, as I was saying earlier, if I think a few years in the future, I know that every general purpose monolithic chain is going to be fast and not going to be able to compete with each other. And so you're going to just naturally need to be application specific and like optimized. And so if we start to build towards that future now, we're going to be in a good place a few years down the line.
Do you feel the timing is right? Like in a way, you have the benefit of hindsight. You've learned from the mistakes of Cosmos, Ethereum, and everything. But then, in terms of what the ecosystem wants today, there's like the alt VM narrative. There's the chain abstraction narrative. Interop is better today. Like the wallets are also better today. So it's almost like the perfect combination of like the right tech, right timing, and the benefit of hindsight. So is that what you're hoping for? Like, okay, people actually understand the benefits of this kind of infrastructure today, so maybe this time will be different.
A little bit. What's nice is that we've been working on Initia for just over 2 years now, and since the beginning, we haven't pivoted once. Right, so like we have had crypto is all about pivoting usually, because you're searching for PMF, but we've just had this consistent belief in what we're building and how this is the future, and how that we need the need for app chains and this experience, and we've just been cooking on it. And I think as these other pieces of infrastructure and these narratives come and they go, it doesn't matter, because like what we're building is so long term anyways, that we can hopefully ride some of these mini narratives. But the end goal is still the same. So like alt VMs was a great fun narrative. It's still going on and it's still cool. And I think that alternative VMs will slowly eat into the EVM's market share. But you might have seen one of my tweets, right? Which was basically like, the VM you choose isn't going to determine your success, but it will change everything about how you build and how you interact with your application every single day and iterate on it. And like having more expressivity there is great, right? There's like, we don't need to fight over one VM or another VM. Like more tools for developers is just fundamentally better for them. And you don't need to be a maxi, just like buy into that narrative. And then I think with chain abstraction and like interop finally reaching states that are like relatively good, it is definitely perfect timing for this. But I still think, the user experience is, we're going to need years before we get to a state that we actually like. People are still saying like chain abstraction, et cetera, is going to be done now. I know Layer Zero loves to say that interop is already solved. But I think, there's still going to be a few more years before stuff really gets nice.
Yeah, I mean, I don't agree with either of those takes. Anyway, like interop is not solved, UX is not perfect, but it's getting better, and we're getting to a point where we can hopefully just use the applications, right? So there was one more tweet that really stood out for me from you, which was like your goals for 2025, right? And you have 4 goals mentioned. So I wanna list those goals and like ask your opinion how likely you think that's gonna happen this year. So the first one was mainnet launch. How are you feeling about it?
I think we're good. We're good on that one. I certainly, okay, I'm 99% confident we're good there.
We're gonna take that as a certain then. Like
We're
mainnet
just,
is gonna happen.
right now we're in our final audits. Those are nearing completion shortly. And so pending no massive critical vulnerabilities, these are like our 4th audits now, so we should be good. But assuming those go all well, we'll have it this year.
Awesome. Then the next one was 30 interwoven rollups. How do you feel about that number?
I think I'm confident. It might have been a low estimate, honestly. We're already at something like 14 interwoven rollups. And what's cool about them is that so far we've been focusing a bit more on quality over quantity. And because of that, we've been more selective on like the number of rollups we onboard because, pre-mainnet, the team internally has a bunch of stuff to build. And so we can't take on too many new ones because everything, of course, is not like perfectly just working all the time.
Mm.
And so after mainnet, when we can start shifting more resources towards like helping other teams even more, doing a bit more of a white glove experience, making sure that there's like enough dashboards to do it all yourself, I think we'll see this number like exponentially increasing. But right now, amongst like the 14 we have, they've raised like 20 million amongst themselves. They're all pretty solid and interesting in building something unique. And I think after mainnet, once you let the floodgates in, we'll certainly hit 30. Maybe lots of them will be useless, but we will certainly hit 30. I think that's why there's the 3rd goal.
Yeah, exactly. So like your third goal was basically 3 apps with real users in PMF. So it's like you want to hit that goal with the first cohort because you're giving them the white glove service right now.
Right. Yeah. It's all about having, I really think, okay, so I wouldn't call Initia an ecosystem. I would say, right, it's like an aligned cabal of multiple different rollups that, share some background infrastructure. They have aligned incentives with Initia VIP. And then, by working together, they can grow the pie, but they're not part of like the Initia ecosystem. They can all be bigger than Initia. They can all onboard from different user bases. Then Initia makes it really nice and easy for them to, spread their users and cross-pollinate. And so we want in this first cohort as many shots on goal to have a very successful rollout, because really all you need is one. I would say, some people say like 3 or 4, but I would say just one is like incredibly hard to do. If you look at any ecosystem right now, or like many large ecosystems, I wouldn't even say that they have one application that is like phenomenal that everyone goes over there to use. Right? If I look at like Aptos, I don't have any app that I use there except for maybe like Thala. Right? I like the team a lot. But there's no like very unique application that people are using. If you look at something like Blast, though, they had a couple of cool ones. Right? They had like baseline markets, fantasy top. Right? These things like captured attention of crypto and users for an extended period of time, and like people went over there because they wanted to use this application. And I think if we can get a couple of those, inshallah, 3 will be cooking.
Awesome. I think that's a good number, like good balance. You can aim for 3. I think it should be possible.
What are some of the top applications that you have gone to a new chain to play with?
I mean, so I guess like Solana has, of course, like Jupiter for me. No, but like of course they've had some good NFT stuff from last cycle as well. And initially they were doing a lot of like lossless gambling kind of thing. So I was always trying that. And then Polymarket on Polygon, like probably everyone has used it. But then other than that, it's mainly been like financial use cases like lending, or just doing some sort of like yield farming, right? So three is definitely a good number. Honestly, like three is also realistic because whenever someone says we want to build applications that are like XYZ use cases, and then they have no use cases, right? So it just almost feels like they're lying. So
Yeah.
three feels perfect.
If you build for everything, you build for nothing.
Yeah.
And if you have 100 applications, you probably have really zero high quality applications, just because it's so hard, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think having quality shots on goal is definitely better.
I think that's why I also respect the approach the abstract guys are taking because they're very focused on just like consumer applications. We don't know what that means, but at least they have a good at least they have a good mental model themselves of like what type of applications they want. So I feel like they're going to try something new and hopefully something new is going to come out of it.
Yeah, I'm very bullish on like this new approach that we're seeing, this cycle of like builder cohorts, right? So like Bear Chain and Bear Builders, Mega Mafia, Abstract. I don't know what their name is, but they have one as well. And I think the roll-ups on Initia, maybe we should create a name for them too. But like this approach is probably good.
It's just cabals at this point, like chain cabals.
Yeah, chain cabals.
Okay, so your fourth goal was probably a bear market goal. Like you wanna squat a plate for reps. So I don't know if that's gonna happen in the bull market with all this activity.
Can you squat a plate for reps?
So like I've switched from being a gym guy to a tennis guy, so I'm not doing heavy weights anymore. But hopefully you can.
Yeah, so I used to play cricket in high school. Very brown of me, and I broke my pelvic bone playing it in the provincial finals of our like high school's like final tournament, and I was the captain. It was basically my life was like a movie. It was crazy. But
you had to bring in the Bollywood angle here.
But then I broke my pelvic bone, and so ever since then I've had trouble squatting. And so this year I'm gonna do it. I'm at like 40 pounds right now that are on each side that I can do it. So I only have like 5 left. But hopefully it'll be probably a post mainnet task.
Awesome. I hope you can squat a plate for reps, and I hope there are 3 apps on Initia. And hopefully Li-Fi can also support the ecosystem down the line. It was really fun chatting with you. Thanks a lot for your time. And yeah, looking forward for the mainnet launch.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Yes, I will see Li-Fi there.
Awesome.